Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Double S Club. Little light staff today, but that's okay. I guess the boys will be able to handle it, right, Andrew?
All right.
So it's your host, Mr. Remarkable, aka Rohan. We got Lord 905 Andrew. Say what up. And this week we have the lovely Faith. Say hello.
Hello, ladayjustme on Instagram. Just joking.
No, man, you need to drop your socials. People need to know. So we'll definitely have all that in the description. By all means, we appreciate you joining us this week.
Thanks.
So for those of you who know who Faith is, well then you know about the good times. But for those who don't,
wait. Good times make me sound whorish. Don't say it like that.
Good time, fellowship, community, and chilling.
Yes. As a strong pillar and a queen of our community, that's what I'm going for.
Thank you.
For those who don't, by all means, she's a great friend of ours, and she's also a local educator representing the Toronto District School Board. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and obviously representing our Toronto Raptors. Yeah. which aren't doing too good this year, but that's a different story.
Too good, she's still repping the brand. I love that. Faithful.
You know why? Because I'm a bandwagon jumper. I'm not afraid to say it. I wait for when they're doing good and I wear the gear, but there's no shame in my game, okay? I keeps it 100.
Nice.
Raptors faithful. I've been there since they've been dying, and I've been there since they're gonna fly. It's all good.
Yeah. They do us well. Even when they take L's, they represent Toronto in a good way. So I'm always proud of our Raptors. Doesn't matter. And you know what? They became champions in 25 years. So that's pretty good for an expansion team, right? So with that being said, we're not here to talk about the Raptors, even though they're the best team in the NBA. Enough said. We're here to talk about how the education game is going on right now. A lot of things are disrupting the whole effect. We're used to you start school in September, you end school in April, you go through, power through, you have your breaks and everything like this. But over the last about year and a half, it's been a roller coaster. So let's talk about all that. So I guess I know, such a heavy statement, eh? She's just like, let me tell you.
Okay, well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
For me personally, having been in the school system in Ontario and now having worked in the Peel system in Ontario for many years, I feel that this pandemic have really emphasized the different standards of greatness for those who are white and those who are marginalized or people of color, whatever the terminology is. Before the pandemic hit, Liche was talking about, you know what, we're going to put it all online. It's going to be easy. It's going to be quick, simple, whatever. We're going to do this one time. It's not going to be a problem. Not taking into account how many electronics are available in the house. How many people can afford the rate of that kind of internet, right? Because that's a lot of money. Never mind that, but who's going to help troubleshoot them when they're having these issues? Because even me as an educator, I still have to call people on the phone and be like, I don't know how to do this. This is not working for me.
Yeah.
Now, if you're living in these marginalized areas where there's 5 or 6 households or 5 or 6 people living in the house sharing one computer, this year has been horrible. So I feel that this pandemic, especially for education, especially for Peel, Toronto, and whatnot, it really, really showed that they don't care about the marginalized community. Even though they want to dress like us, they like to bop to our music, they want to drop the slang and the lingo, but when it comes to health and making sure that we're good, they didn't care about us. They didn't. And I was very on the fence. When this whole thing started, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to give Ford a chance, right? Because we do need to have some kind of money coming in. But then people are not getting the support that they need. You know, look at right now. Why is it that the volleyball courts or the volleyball is available downtown, but in the hood and the ghetto, they're fully like putting pieces of wood on basketball hoops?
Yeah.
You understand? Even in terms of how the vaccinations, which is a choice, I'm not going to bash or praise, it is a choice. Even in terms of the vaccination, look at the areas that were offered this vaccine first. Now that it's become a huge problem, now they're getting into the nitty gritty. We got to help these people. Meanwhile, at what cost? At what cost?
Here's the thing. We stand I mean, the whole process. I've been through the Toronto system, and now I'm a father about to have a child in the Canadian school. And my biggest worry as a whole is that I've seen this at like exactly what you're talking about at its ugly head, where I went from like my mom got lucky in the sense that when we first got here, we got a chance to move to a rich area. So that was Forest Hill. So I went to school probably for the first 5 to 7 years of my life in Forest Hill. And then when I moved to Brampton, I got to see the difference in how they educate, the difference in how the community is set up, the difference in resources, the difference in overall program. Like, I went to a high school in Toronto where literally it was 5 floors, you had 3 gyms, and multiple teachers at your disposal. It's to the point where it was an old army base and they reconverted it into a school. So they used to upgrade the school every 3 to 4 years. So they were always, but here's the thing. I will say the one benefit of this, it was mostly students motivated. Students would actually go out there and find resources and actually create programs and actually get sponsorship a lot of the time. But the school was built for that type of situation to happen, where we had clubs, we had resources where we can pull from our communities. We had senior students that would come back and actually teach the next generation how to actually get jobs and how to actually. So these were things that were actually ingrained in the school mecca. So I actually have to give Northern Secondary a huge, huge, huge bit of praise for that. But what I'm going to say is, when I got to Brampton, different resources is astronomically different. Rohan and I can both speak to this because we both went to the same high school. BSS, it's basically a bunch, like the main school is tiny and then the rest of it's portable. I think they've changed that since we've been out of school.
But yeah, they did some serious renovations to it. They added like
they've done
automotive wing and stuff.
But the resources to like the teachers, the resources to like the networks in like dealing with the students, like as a whole, we used to have an assembly at my old school, Northern, where it was the entire student body, everybody, all classes, everybody, in one place. That would give you a chance to voice your opinion. It would also give you a chance to listen to what's actually happening in school, yada, yada, yada. But that was never even possible at the other school. As a resource, like that was infinitely better with a form of communication rather than using a PA. Because nobody needs to listen. I'm just looking at the difference in how you apply resources, and I can definitely say you are right, because the resources that are implemented into the community are very small. It's not a giant network that they can pull from. Like, even when it came down to like sports.
Yes.
The difference in between like sports resources and the difference between towards education is huge. Because I've looked at when I went to school in Northern, I had the ability to choose whatever art program class I wanted to. In fact, I played on almost, I think it was like 14 teams by the time I left that school, because I had a goal. As a young Black kid, I'd never tried all of these sports. So I wanted to try curling. I wanted to try, so even if I failed, I wanted to try every single one and see which teams I could make. And by the time I was done my high school there, I had made 14 teams. Because the resources were there, I had been a part of 6 clubs. Like, they had African History Month clubs.
So
as a standard there.
Are you speaking the fact that over time the resources have been diminished, or the resources have been put somewhere else, or is it a lack of priority?
I think
All
it's
of
more
it.
than allocation. I think it's allocation and the fact that they don't see it as a priority. As a school, as that infinite size there, they deal with multicultural communities. Yes, you
Mhm.
do have some black kids, you do have a lot of white kids that go there, but you also have the Indians. Everybody lives in Toronto, so it's a true melting pot of a group of community. There's
Have
no individualized community there.
have you
That has to go
gone
to school.
have you gone back to your school? Because you highlighted the fact that
Yeah,
and
yeah,
has
I
there been a
have
change?
4 to 5 years ago, I will say there was a small change when it came to student body involvement.
Mhm.
But outside of that, the communication, the way they deal with the school, a lot of the stuff is still there because I spoke to one of my actual former educators, Ainsworth Morgan, who became a
Okay.
principal later on. And he actually enlightened me that he left Toronto because there was no room for him. He wanted to go into a marginalized community and actually affect change there.
Mhm.
So that's where he became a principal outside of Toronto because he saw the same thing I saw. There's no effort being put towards the community. Unless you leave a place like Northern's a great school, so you pretty much have all the resources you need as a teacher. So for him to leave that and not want to take a teaching position there and want to go somewhere else shows the need that there is.
I'm a little confused on the point that you're trying to highlight, Joe, because like it sounds like Northern is more of a school that was a have school, right? Because if you're putting in the context of being like you went to Northern, you had all those programs, you had all that support, like what was the thing that triggered it? Was it because it was a location? Because I hear what Faith is kind of highlighting, saying certain schools are being segmented.
That's exactly. I'm going with that point exactly. It's only
So where
certain
was
schools that
it
they're giving.
located? Where was your school located? Predominantly white,
Predominantly white neighborhood.
Okay.
Well,
So
see,
this is where I'm trying to ground the conversation and kind of make the parallel between what Faith is saying and how you're highlighting, because it's kind of like a long-winded roundabout to kind of say you are correct. There are certain areas that are getting a little bit more attention, and as a result of it, they may perform differently versus other schools that are being impacted other areas. And it is something that is being reflective and being exasperated during this pandemic, because I feel that the educators are only privy to so much. And then now you're in a situation where they're passing the responsibility now more so on the parents and the community to take care of their own. And I think what you're both highlighting is, as a whole, our community in particular is very ill-equipped to take care of the educational and the wellness needs of our people. And that's something that we need to not only recognize, but be able to express and address, especially with the people who have the power, and remind them that it's just like, because it's going to be unfair. I feel like the concern is that when these students reintegrate themselves back into the educational system and they're being compared against their peers of other ethnic backgrounds, they're going to be at an even greater disadvantage, because it's just like, oh, we went through this period where we had to struggle even more, right? Because I've been hearing a lot about that too, Faith, on how households are struggling to be able to educate out because of poor internet speeds, because internet's expensive.
It's very expensive.
Very.
And let me just say this. Sorry to cut you off, Rohan, because before you become a permanent staff, you have to supply, right? You go to different schools.
Yeah.
The difference, even in just the appearance of some of these schools in Mississauga versus Brampton is astounding.
Yeah.
It's astounding. I feel like Mississauga, they're building a new school every 2-3 years. Everything is brand spanking new. The staff is walking in happy. And while the area is technically white, the population actually is more so East Indian.
Yeah.
With a little bit of white folks. More in Brampton, where you have more, it's more like the white kids are the marginalized visually.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing. Half the schools in Brampton are broken down and run down.
Yes.
Sometimes they build schools and they're just sitting here empty. And it's like, wow, you could have made a bus take a bunch of kids over there. You could have put some staff in there. It's just really like, what who is in charge of the money? And clearly there's favorites here because
All right,
everybody hates Brampton.
let's ask the
Everybody
question,
hates
though.
Brampton.
Let's ask a real question though. Is this a question of actually resource allocation, or is this an actual, say, thing of favoritism? Because if we look at Brampton as a whole, right, it's been ran badly by multiple generations of leaders. But now it's to the point where, is it fixable, or is it just to the point that it's running its course? Because from what I can see in the education system of Brampton, it's just a half-hearted, like a mishposh. Like they just, every once in a while when they put a school together, they don't realize how many people are coming. So then they have
Yes.
to have portables. And then after that, they can't expand the school ground anymore because there's so many people living beside the school. Rather than build a new one, they just cram everybody in there. And I think
Well,
that's the biggest problem we see.
it's multifaceted because the way that most areas are developed is one, based off the overarching expense and property taxes and the value of the area that you're doing, and two, it's the population density. One of the things that the areas, especially in Peel region, struggle at, and we're all aware of the multi-generational or multi-family housing. So in an opportunity to avoid any issues, I'm kind of saying, like, I have a 3,000 square foot house, but I have 10 people in it. Not everybody fills out the census properly. So in doing that, you have people saying, oh, we're just a family of 4, when it's really a family of 7. So if you do that, a couple hundred times, a school is built on scale. So they'll say, okay, we have a population area of this, we can cater to about 10,000 students, boom, they make it, and it's 13,000 students going into that student school. So then they're throwing on portables, and the ability for them to grow and expand accordingly gets impacted because of budget. So I'm not justifying the poor school system. It's just, these are some of the semantics that lead up to the drop in availability of education. So
that's why I asked that question.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why, like, we already know that the demographic of, like, even though Peel region is one region, we know that Mississauga, Oakville, Streetville, all that sort of stuff, predominantly white. Sorry.
We call that the rich people area. There's pockets where there's like, there's pockets where there's like, regular people, but the areas that you just listed at the top of the hat, we're like, that's the rich people area.
All right, well, I got a question for you, because you're an educator and you're in the system. Is this a communication issue that you're running into with parents? Like, whereas, all right, when you're in these other richer areas, do you find it easier to communicate with the parents? Are you getting like some form of feedback quicker? Or is it when you get to the hood areas, everybody's so closed off because they're just worried about themselves? What is it that leads to this? Like, what? I know you can't give me like the final answer, but what have you seen that leads to a lot of these problems?
It's all of the above. Like, I find because they're putting so much more money into the Mississauga schools, there's more of a tighter leash in terms of how the money is being spent and how the resources are being used. And then there's also the visual. Is it working?
And again, it's not, there's probably favoritism, but again, you also have to recognize that.
Oh, you cut out.
Oh.
There you go.
Yeah.
The sound was just gone for a second.
I think the real answer to this, and I'm speaking from an executable standpoint, because we could sit here and scream favoritism all we want. We could sit here and extreme racism all we want. With the like the demographic of power shifting when it comes to population from predominantly white to predominantly South Asian, if we want to be specific in the Brampton area, that community recognizes the value of education. Right. So there will be, at least you'd like to speculate, there would be a push in regards to investment and growth. And
it's already happening. I can see it. I can see it already happening in Brampton because they're starting their own schools and running their own area. Right.
So, and then, they're taking upon the education through their mosques and stuff like that. And they're getting a little bit more involved. So like from Andrew's point of saying Brampton was a little bit corrupt. We don't want to name names, but we know that like there was a lot of mismanagement and scrutiny when it comes to the property tax and things not being applied properly and stuff like that. So money was being impacted. Like, you know, Patrick Brown is a pretty good mayor. He gets into the situation. So he's dealing with someone else's mess, his predecessor. Yes, and Brampton is kind of a mishmash in a lot of things. What I would like to say, if he or anybody of his administration staff ever gets around to seeing one of our episodes, is you really need to almost rebuild the cost structure and how you spend money in Brampton, especially when you have your partner city, Mississauga, constantly in a situation where there's like, it's getting to the point where on a regular basis, Mississauga is like, we don't want to be part of Peel Region. We'll do it on our own.
Because
right?
They make so much influx of money, they don't want to spend it outside.
Yeah,
right.
I think
right. So it's one of those things where our mayor and our council needs to go back and say, our community is being impacted. We have situations where we have an issue with housing, either by chance or choice. People are doubling up in housing. They already know and privy to the fact that like there's legal basements, there's multi-generational families, there's a whole bunch of stuff like that where they're not getting the money that they should, because there's more people living in the city than they're aware of. So they need to find a better way to get money out of the city, right? And they need to invest in things that can generate capital, like bringing businesses back to Brampton so they can get corporate taxing and actual tangible funding for the city to be reinvested into the city, especially particularly education, transportation, infrastructure, all those things, right? They're not putting themselves to be in a competing aspect. Like, you know, back in the day when Brampton was deemed the commuter city, that was great in the 60s and 70s. That's one of the reasons why like 410 comes straight up the middle of Brampton, because it was literally designed to be like, you live in Brampton, you work and play everywhere else. It's accessible to Toronto, it's accessible to Woodbridge, it's accessible to Mississauga. You can get around. But that concept is dated because of the fact that there's too many people living in here and too many people leaving the city on a regular basis in order to do their business elsewhere. Like, that's money leaving the city. Everything as small as, hey, I live in Brampton, I work in Toronto. Okay, you're gonna eat in Toronto. You're gonna entertain yourself in Toronto. Exactly. You're gonna socialize in Toronto. So that's all that money during the day, Monday to Friday, 40 hours a day being committed outside the city. Even 9 times out of 10, when you get something as simple as gas, you're not gonna fill up your tank every time you're at home, per se. You might have to fill up your tank when you're in Brampton. So it's all that money that's being utilized in other cities that's not being taxable in Brampton. And when you get people who can't afford to live, much less can't afford to live in general in the city, you can only tax them so much before you bleed them dry. That's why a lot of people are leaving the city.
But see, this is the thing though. This is why we need to have people in these power positions with some kind of connection to the actual community, regardless of color, to understand what's going on. I always feel like in terms of how Brampton is run and how the school board is run, it's always a bunch of people telling us what to do who haven't been here and God knows how long. In the education system, the people who make the policies and procedures, they're damn near ready to retire. When was the last time you were in an actual classroom to really see what's going on in the world today? Same thing with the community.
Yeah, but
you know, they're not in there. They're not in there. You can post for photo ops, you know, and get your street cred. But are you really in the community seeing what's going on? You touched on the housing system, you know. Unfortunately, this pandemic has really brought to light domestic violence and what women are going through. You know how many women are getting beaten right now because there's like maybe 1 or 2 shelters in Brampton? How? How? I don't get it.
Abuse goes both ways because there's enough men. It's just like, you know.
Yeah, that's facts.
Right, because if you're a man and you lost your job and your woman's like harping at you, like, why don't you go out and get a job? Blah, 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 blah. Like that gets to a man too. Not being able to
no one should hit anybody. No one should hit anybody. Woman shouldn't hit man. Man shouldn't hit woman. But like,
you're right. The lack of support, and that's the thing. as a community, it's not designed to be a community. It's
No.
just a an amalgamation of like houses and people there and convenience stores and 5 different Walmarts and stuff like that. Like it's a mishposh of things. So it impacts all the things. The things that you need in order to say you're a strong community do not exist as prevalent in Brampton as it does in its neighboring city. And it's kind of hypocritical that they can promote to say Brampton is one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. It's a top 5. It's seen as a good community, a city to live in. Yeah.
Every time someone says top 5, I have to laugh. I'm sorry.
No, but you guys also gotta look at this from the infrastructure base of what's being demanded. The biggest problem of our city, like as a Brampton resident, and the reason why a lot of people, even from the old guard, wanted to leave so quickly is because they don't like a lot of the expense that's going on. The people you say that are in charge of these situations and the people you'd like to actually see represent these communities didn't want them here in the first place. That's the first thing you have to actually put into actual assessment. The second thing you have to put into assessment.
I don't believe that.
Elaborate.
I don't believe that.
I'll elaborate on that. Think about it this way. When I got to this city, when your parents and everybody else were probably here were set up.
Yeah, we've been here since the 80s.
That's what I'm saying. So there is an actual group of communities that have been here, a group of color, or people who have actually been here from its inception. But what I'm talking about is the actual influx of individuals who are coming here with large amounts of cash and skyrocketing profits and yada yada yada. That all leads to all of it. But the real problem is, like you said, you have 5 or 6 people in a household. You have this much people. So now it shortens that gap on what the city can actually accomplish. So rather than actually building shelters and all of those things you are asking for, they are now worried about all the other things they cannot actually facilitate.
But that's the thing.
That actually all goes into I'm just saying, both of you are right.
If they keep sitting there and saying, "Oh, I'm worried about how everything's blown up," you're never going to come to a solution. And that's why I said the design is archaic, and that's why I was challenging and saying they don't want people to be here. That'd be completely like ignorant to say you're part of the GTA. You know that the place expands everywhere. Like you're going to sit here and say, "I'm watching Richmond."
Weren't ready for the. But let's be honest, bro. They weren't ready for the influx of all those people moving from Regent Park and getting every single community torn down and then told to move to Brent. They were never ready for that. The city
actually, hold on. It's not a question of ready per se. It's that they didn't do anything with the information, because like the scandal that our previous mayor was a part of was the fact that I don't care if you want to out me, come at me. She signed off on all these housing projects. Yeah. So affordable housing, development, all these like Springdale,
generational programming, a whole bunch.
No, all these housing, period. So like Springdale, the expansion of Heart Lake, Mount Pleasant, all these things. These were all signed off of saying, yeah, I'm gonna okay the housing. And then no one sat there and said, with us doing this, there's gonna be that infrastructure. So it's not the fact that they weren't ready. They did absolutely nothing to generate the supporting components of it, right? You go anywhere else, every area is a self-sustaining area within the city.
That is true. I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with
that's
that.
Definitely true.
You can't do that in Brampton. It's like you have to travel on the other side of somewhere else just to get something, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, it's not structured in a way for it to develop naturally and organically. So all these things impact how the city was developed. So they need to tear down that structure and sit here and say, based off of what we're dealing with right now, let's fulfill our needs. And they need to encourage things in order to generate the additional funds and also make it so people can stay in the city. Because it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem if everybody wasn't reinvesting in Brampton, right? Like if you if you spent more time at home because you weren't commuting to Scarborough or commuting to Toronto, then you'd be less inclined to have as many people in your house.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Because it wouldn't be like almost shift work. It's like, yeah, you work night shift, you work day shift. I don't get to run into you. Maybe in the weekends, we might triple each other, but then no. And it would also make it more affordable because the less money you spend going somewhere else, the less time you're investing in things, the more you're going to be able to do things like you might stay at work a little bit longer. You might do
but is it even possible? Let's be honest. Let's actually ask the real question. The fact that we don't even have a true downtown, the fact that we don't even have the no, I'm just like, it's a laughable moment, but I'm asking some real questions here. Is it even possible for us to fix this city and actually fix it so it's better for the next group of
They need to go and
in?
talk to some of the other cities and ask them how they implement it. Like Mississauga, the Square One and everything like that, and their new downtown city hall wasn't what it was.
Yeah.
They tore it down on purpose to sit
and rebuilt it in an area that works.
Exactly. So they sat there and said, you know what? We want a hub, an accessible hub. We're just going to tear this down, cause problems for everybody for like 5-6 years, throw money at it, and make it work. And then now everything expands from there, right? Brampton needs to take a moment and say, okay, we're going to pick somewhere that's going to be our hub and rebuild it. And Andrew, you and I talked about this in previous conversations, where they need to be aggressive in that aspect and sit down with the community in a sense and say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to get it. Are you guys down with this kind of inconvenience? Because I'm quite certain if they came back to the citizens, the true citizens of Brampton, that this is what we want to do, people would be complacent. Everything's scattered.
And that's the problem. But that's the problem, though. There are solutions. The problem is with these solutions, and sorry, just to keep it real, who really wants to put in the work in the community? Because a lot of people talk that talk, but who really wants to be there to put in that work in the community? It's just like when you go to work and they have all these workshops that you can sign up for. Who's really going to take the time to sit and plan for that stuff and make it follow through? The community itself is sick. We don't trust each other. We're jealous of each other. We don't know whether we want to be rich and like elite like Mississauga or hood and greedy like Toronto. I feel like Brampton is in a constant state of middle child, just waiting to see which side is getting the most attention and piggyback off of that. But in the end, we're all suffering because no one is taking that initiative to stand up really and say, this is what we're going to do. We got to do it this way. It's just not happening.
Right.
Yeah, but is it a question of just representation, or is it a question of, can you actually get these people together to actually get behind these policies to change? Because I think that's the biggest problem. I think we have such a mishposh group of people in this city and so much influence from so many different communities where it's going to be impossibly hard to get one voice in a position of power to actually affect change. Like, how many people are going to be able to be represented by one person? It's only going to be one ethnic group at a time or one this at a time. It can't really be for everybody. So it's only going to take certain people getting what they want and then hope to God that when they're getting what they want, it balances out for everybody else. That's the real chase to this, is I don't think you're ever going to find any true balance that way.
I mean, that sounds very, like you're stuck accepting reality and whatever. The main thought in this is that, like we started, the pandemic is revealing a lot of cracks in the foundation and making people aware of the fact that certain things aren't sustainable. Unfortunately, important things like housing, education, wellness, people's well-being is being impacted. It's unfortunate that our community, which in most cases is marginalized, is being exasperated even more. And it's prevalent, especially you being a member of an education system, you're seeing the contrast between certain regions and how they treat situations. Yes, I would argue that Mississauga does have more money for funding and they can do that, but it's kind of disgusting that they're partner cities and no one ever says, like, especially all the time when Mississauga is just like, I want to separate from Brampton. They're like, yeah, because taxation and this and that.
They constantly talk about it.
And that, and like, no one, like, I remember Doug Ford coming and saying, no, the regional structure wouldn't be able to sustain certain cities leaving their regions, because there's a lot of cities that want to pull out. Like Richmond Hill wants to pull out of their region. I know there's another region. I think Waterloo wants to pull out of their region or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's prevalent that certain cities, they reach a level where they feel that they can manage themselves, but they never, the federal or provincial government never comes back and says, okay, you know what? Instead of you bitching about you want to leave, why don't you figure out a way to make the other regions manageable? Because Brampton and Mississauga are like very similar when it comes to ideals. And
it's just the care.
I don't think they grasp the fact that if they do leave there, like, all right, let's take it in. Brampton is a hub point. We supply all the working people for these cities. You leave, and then you start making it more inconvenient in any way possible for these people to go and work in these cities. And what do you think is going to start happening?
The leaving, it's not like they're going to massive border literally move out. They're still going to be there, right?
No,
like the jobs.
That, but what I'm saying to you is that the style. Okay, the style of how people live in these cities completely changes because, let's say you live in Toronto and you live in Brampton. Your transport time, the way you like everything that you think about is trying to find a job out here because it's so inconvenient that every day. So now you're trying to find a sister city, which may end up being Mississauga, which may end up being whatever it is that's closest to you to try and get a better job. Now that works because you live in Brampton, which is a cheaper point. What happens when we start expanding to the point where it's no longer affordable to live here? Where do those people go?
No,
are we just going to expand to a point where everything becomes expensive and then nobody works nowhere?
Everything will continue getting more expensive. And if regions pull out or cities pull out of regions, the only thing it's impacting is the overall economical, right? Because all the money gets thrown up into a pool and it gets disseminated, right? Like Peel District School Board, Peel Sanitation, That's how it gets broken down. So the cost of doing things might become more expensive with the absence of those cities. But the point that I was trying to get is that instead of these higher tiers saying, we're not going to permit you to leave, right? Because they've never come back to Mississauga and said, like, we'll consider it. It's like, you can't leave because you subsidize Brampton and Caledon. They should come back and say, all right, cool. What's the overarching problem? How do we figure out how to get more money? If it means, we have to change or incentivize certain things for people, then they should. And I'm a strong believer, just like how Joe Biden's doing with his taxes. He's raising taxes for businesses.
Yeah.
Why? Because he knows that at the end of the day, it's better to put the responsibilities on the businesses to be more efficient, lean, or take at their profit. Because when you have companies turning around saying, oh, we need, like, what was it, Loblaws? They made like $45 million profit on top of last year because of the pandemic. And then you're turning around and saying, yo, you can't tax 10% of that to go towards your schools?
Yeah.
And Loblaws' head office is right there in Brampton. Like
Amazon too. Right.
Two of their biggest hub locations are in Brampton, and that's the biggest problem. We have a bunch of hub points here and no way of actually capitalizing on it.
I feel like Brampton has an identity crisis. We don't know who we want to be. Like, I really feel like that Brampton does not have its own identity, and that's why we suffer so much, and that's why people are so quick to say, Brampton. We're like the middle child.
I'm going to tell you the real, because I do this all the time. You can tell how invested in the city I am. So, again, it goes back, to how they were doing the city before. And Brampton was always known as a blue-collar city. That's why it's just like, again, you live in Brampton, you work everywhere else to get the job. So that's why most of the stuff back in the day is like factories, distributions, this, that, like Chrysler. Like we have an assembly plant in the middle of our city. That like when you go back into history, some of the businesses that Brampton was proud to say that they had was like Chrysler, HBC or Zeller, all that sort of stuff, head office. And they're like, yeah, they were okay with that. But they never turned around and said, yo, we're going to future-proof the city and make it so like next generations, as these businesses fall, others can rise. So that's why we have an abundance of that. In addition, because of the fact that we had the increase of housing, they need to justify the expense to do all these roads and expansions and highways and stuff like that. So that's why we predominantly have logistical companies in the city to sit here and say, we justify having these roads because trucks need to go on them. So their business...
Okay, justify the rate of car insurance, because that's atrocious.
Well, they can do that because they can say that everyone needs to drive, right? So they benefit from that because, again, our transit, the city structure is poor, right? So you can't be like, oh, I'm only commuting like 5 minutes to my job, which pays me well in Brampton. You have to go across the city or leave the city in order to go to work. The only way you can do that is either jump on 4 buses or drive. So they created these things because everything was a response to a different response with the lack of planning. And as a result, people are becoming more aware of that. They're saying, Chuck, why am I spending so much time commuting or doing this or doing that? If I'm going to do that, I might as well go to like freaking Milton, right?
Get a cheaper house,
get a cheaper house. I'm going to have to commute anyway.
Take the transport.
Right, exactly. So it's just one of those things. And even now with the proposed expansion for the 413 or whatever, right? Yeah, they're talking about the economical impacts or environmental impacts of going through the green belt, because like that's one of the last things that Brampton is positively known for, having a lot of green space. And it's just like, okay, cool. You're gonna do it anyway. Don't lie to us. Don't sit here and say you're not gonna do it. But there's no plan for any infrastructure around it. That's and you know what's gonna go around it. You know what's going to go around the highway? Fucking houses. We don't need more houses.
Is there even any room? I feel like we're at capacity. Like, what else can you build on in Brampton?
There's tons of room in Brampton.
No. If you know anything about Toronto and you look at the way Toronto is built, there is plenty of room in Brampton the way a developer sees this city.
And trust.
I need to come out of my cave more.
And trust, for the right money,
people will move here in droves.
No, a builder can go to the city. So again, Mr. Brown, watch it.
Yep.
A builder can go to the city and say, yo, I want to build a house up at like Old Mill Road, but I can't sell it as Caledon. Go talk to Caledon and get that space recommissioned as Brampton.
Yep. They did it. They've done it a few times.
Yes. With the right money, they'll go and do that. Because Caledon will turn around and be like, yo, you want to give me like $1.8 million for this farmland? Take it and go.
And it's gone. Yeah. They'll devalue it
and now it's part of Brampton. But they'll just,
here's the real question.
Take the eraser to the line and just be like, whoop, Brampton. And that's it. So it's one of those things where, like I said, like we all said, whoever, young stud, I don't care if you're black, brown, white, Chinese, whatever, when you're sitting on that panel and go back to say, you're going to do this to our city anyway. I know you're going to drop the highway next, like after Doug Ford loses office, because you know he's going to lose. This pandemic's over.
Right? Bro, that's a whole other show. That's a whole other
He's already hired a PR rep to start his campaign. Yeah. So you know that's going to be a struggle. So right now it's just like, oh, you guys don't want the highway because it's going to impact green space. We're not going to talk about it. As soon as the elections are done, so about that highway.
Highway again.
Right? Yeah.
So
his brother, you guys got to think about it. His brother's supposed to plan to pay for that highway from a long time ago, and it was supposed to pay for infrastructure for basically 2/3 of all the highways, and they rejected that plan.
But what they should do, and as much as I don't want to sit here and be pro-business and stuff like that, they should literally sit here and say, okay, fine, we're going to build that highway. At some part of it, we're going to make a business hub. We're going to encourage all these companies to come. So it's just like, Hey, Netflix, yeah, you want to send an office and do an office in Toronto? Would you like a production studio up in Brampton? We'll make it accessible off the highway. Hey, Amazon, you want to put another distribution center here? Okay, but we're going to make a hub here. So you're going to be nestled here next to the highway. Your design is going to be set here. We're going to create an incentive for you to build because of accessibility, but we're going to tax you.
It's not even just that. You haven't even expanded to look at Tesla. They're about to build all those battery centers around the town. Why don't we put a bunch of those actual battery centers right on the highway instead of creating them in malls and all of these spaces? People are traveling on a highway.
Places.
Go right there to the charging center on the highway, pull over, get your charge, head back out.
Right.
But see, that's what I mean. They're not thinking about the people. They're thinking that Brampton doesn't need that because they're thinking for a specific group of people in mind. You understand? Because really, who can afford a Tesla?
We need better paying. We need better paying jobs so people can afford to be in the city, but also so they're not running out of the city in order to spend money elsewhere else. Like, the East End, Markham, Richmond Hill, all that sort of stuff. They have a lot of big companies there. They got like your
IBM is there.
IBM is there. Sony is there. Intel.
There's a bunch of tech ones that are there too. That just got started.
AMD, Intel,
Siemens or Simons or whatever.
Intel. I think Intel is also down there. They're
both there. Intel and AMD are out on that side.
So they've got hub points.
Right.
Now, but before we pull this onto the technology discussion, I'm going to ask this so it goes back to the education discussion. Now that we can fix or we can see somewhat of a light in this kind of conversation, like we can easily talk about yada yada what they have to do, but the hard points that affects our children coming into this school are going to be infinite for the next 5 to 7 years. Like this system right now, I want to know, Faith, do you think these kids are actually being educated to a point where they're going to be able to survive the next 3 to 5 years once this is over? Because I don't think the average child is paying attention in a Zoom class. I don't think they're actually getting enough information or retaining enough information in these classes to actually be able to move forward. Are we going to have to reteach these kids?
Yes, because this is the thing. There's the way that the higher ups want us to teach. There's the way that makes sense. And then the way that works best for the child. 3 different perspectives, and nobody wants to make a middle ground. Honestly, it's going to be, especially for kindergarten, I would say grade 2 and under, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be, even just in terms of like, just for even basic manners. Because when these kids get irritated with the teacher, they already know mute, end call. Imagine when they come in that room where they're not the boss anymore. There's other kids who have different opinions. And depending on whether they have a teacher that's actually happy in their job, it will make an impact. Because I will tell you, especially this year, there are a lot of unhappy educators. And there's a lot of unhappy educators who've made it known for years and years and years how the system works in terms of hiring, But I say this for police officers as well as educators. If you're going to be working that close in hand with the public, I feel like you need to have a psychological evaluation because some of these people are crazy.
What, you mean the teachers?
Yeah, just in terms of like their reasoning for getting into teaching. Like if you go to university, because remember, university, that's a privilege as well, right? When I was growing up, they pushed college and trade school, the ones that were even somewhat considered for that capability, right? But it was the richer kids who went to university, not thinking about what they're going to do after mommy and daddy's money right now. They're just, I'm going to take something because I'm in school. Yeah. I'm going to take geography. I'm going to take art history. What else can you do with that but teach?
Yeah.
And you're struggling, you take whatever job you get, right? And to be honest, in the education system, those who teach the primary grades are usually there by choice or punishment. Nobody really wants to deal with the younger ones because it's a lot of patience, it's a lot of one-on-one, a lot of repetition, and they feel like they don't deserve it. Just
I can
facts.
speak to that. I can speak to that.
Like,
I went to a school with an educator I won't even allocate his name because it's not worth it. But the man flat out told me when I was a kid, because I was a hyperactive kid, like you said, patient. And he flat out told me, you ain't going to amount to shit. You can't even sit in a room and read a book. He flat out told me, and I've let those words motivate me every day of my life. But the man flat out told me, you aren't going to be shit. So I can definitely attribute to what you're saying. Like, you need to love your job because you affect a child for the rest of his life without knowing, just with your attitude.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, I often get in trouble. Not trouble, let me rephrase that. I often get spoken to about my approach in educating because, again, I'm a hyperactive child person as well. I have ADHD, and school was very difficult for me. It wasn't that I wasn't smart. It wasn't that I was being a brat. My mind just processes information differently. But because I'm Black, people judge our emotions differently and attribute certain situations to negativity. I happen to be lucky, and I happen to be right. I happen to be one of the lucky ones who actually met a few teachers that actually cared about me, who took the time to sit down with me and say, you can do this. How can we make it work for you? We're going to get through this. And I still talk to my teacher to this day, my grade 5 teacher. My grade 5 teacher who argued with the principal in front of me, stop making her mad on purpose. I still talk to her till this day.
Yeah, I got a teacher
but
like that.
She taught me, right? Like, everyone learns differently. And I feel like right now, because everyone is so stressed, everyone is looking at the academic points, but it's not necessarily like giving the information. It's how the children are processing it.
Well, yeah, and you're running into a lot of kids who are hyper inundated with information. They don't know how to take in that kind of information. They're more emotionally charged than ever, these kids. No fault of their own. It's just that they're exposed to more. And then with a lot of educators suffering on their either inability to teach or a lack of desire, right? And I say inability not because they can't. Some can, but to be able to teach in a way that they want, right? Because this is hard.
Yeah.
Like being able to convey certain things during a call, like even our conversations in Zoom, it's challenging because of the fact that we're so dependent on our core relationship with each other to make this work. But if you're dealing with a bunch of people that you can't build that foundation with, it's very hard to convey a message and to retain their information. And we're just talking about one thing. Right. So, when the engagement is there and the lack of authority and a whole bunch of stuff like that, it becomes very problematic. And like you said, Faith, the kid's ability just to be like, yeah, I'm done with this. Right. Like,
I'm just gonna speak to everybody anybody who is watching this. And I think Faith and I have already spoken.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Faith and I have already spoken to this on this point once before, where she's a single mom and she's dealing with actual children to deal with this. And the only reason why I say this is related is because the same thing applies. The discipline that is required to actually raise a child in today's environment is completely missing. Yeah. And the fact that you're taking away core discipline as a whole, then you're stripping the teacher's ability to actually be able to discipline a child. So there you go. There's 2 points away where the kid's just going out and doing whatever.
Disclaimer: we're not talking about beating kids. We're just talking.
No. There's discipline.
We're talking about actually discipline, like actually being able to sit your child down and actually explain why his behavior is not he or she is not acceptable. That is missing from today's culture.
Yes.
Whole. And I think the reason why I bring this point up is because how do educators deal with because the whole concept of the show was to nurture for we're trying to figure out what kind of attitude do you nurture when you have a brat that comes into your classroom. How do you adjust that attitude so they don't become more of a brat? Like, how do you actually nurture their softer side and try to help them be more of an emotive and more of an interior person? Like, how do you deal with that as a whole?
You have
knowing
to
that these kids have no discipline.
That's the thing. And a lot of teachers don't like, not teachers, educators, because there's so many elements in the school board now. There's teachers, designated early childhood educators, educational assistants, but just to be an educator, you need to find some kind of a way to bond with the children in order to make it click. Myself, clearly through this program right now, you can see I'm very childlike in terms of my spirit and my attitude, and just in the way that even I take in information. And pardon?
But that's needed.
But it gets me
somebody
in
with
trouble.
a childlike wonder to teach.
It gets me in trouble a lot because people see that I'm not doing I'm doing something different than what they're doing, and it's working, and they get mad and they like to start.
I would think that's more censorship on our angle. We can get back to that. I think Faith had a.
Yeah, there's probably a high demand on the internet right now.
Like, what is the one that he was listening to? 24K Golden. Like, I think these people are trash, right? But like, I have to keep my ear open because that's how we bond. Tell me what's popping with Dude right now. How does that sound? How does that song sound? What? Let me school you on some Eric B. And this is hip hop, you know? You do that even in the classroom. Like, oh, say word. You like strawberry shortcake? Let me show you strawberry shortcake from back in the day. But because the school system is based and it profits off of white privilege, they want this.
Yeah, but I think that's not even just a problem that it's also facilitated in privilege. I think the issue that we're seeing is, you just said it, another teacher sees what you're doing and does not like the impact that you are having. And I think that's the biggest problem we're having. Rather than the cause and effect being measured, rather than them looking at saying, okay, she has the ability to connect with these children on this type of level and then being able to pass that information on, they're not looking at the effect that you're having on the children. They're looking at the cause. And I think that's the biggest issue we have when it comes to education. We are not allowing people to actually have a positive effect on people because we're typecasting them into a box.
Because that's how you get the funding. That's how you get the funding. Like, I'm telling you, especially for special education. For special education, it sucks because our job in special education is to promote independence, to make sure that the child gets everything that they need. But if they have so many check marks, you know what? They don't need us anymore on paper. On paper, it looks like they're perfectly fine. But if you know and relate with that child in real life, you know they still need you for a little bit longer. But on paper, because let's face it, the school is still a system, a business, you know, the numbers have to match the need.
It's unfortunate that you know, it's victim to that kind of structure where they have to churn out certain things, and you know, there's their overarching success rate. And I think
what do you think, you know, assembly line phenomenon?
Yeah, and the problem is like, you can have that, but when there's not systems to do quality control and actually address problems in the manufacturing of functional people, that's where it's problematic. Because it's like in Faith, they still have the no child gets left behind system, and you know, everybody gets a pass and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's a huge problem.
So it's like I get it. It's difficult for children because, you know, no child wants to be held back. No parent wants that kid where, you know,
plus we don't want to leave anybody behind.
Well, so nobody wants to get left behind because the emotional and the psychological impacts of that, right? Because some kids will be like, yeah, you know what, I just learned differently and I gotta take grade 7 over again. Okay, right? But now, because there's so much ridicule that goes with it, right? Like, you don't want that to turn into a cyberbullying situation or a kid being mocked and made fun of. They need to keep that going, but also because of the system, right? They need to know if this kid enters the school system at grade 6, in 4 years they're out. They can't have a system where a kid enters and it's just like it took you
Revolving
6
door.
years. It took you 6 years to finish a 4-year program, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. But it's unfortunate that the more we create these things, there's not things to help the students either get the education they need in order to continue down the path, or if they do fall a little bit, there's programs there to say, all right, cool. Obviously, we're not going to leave you behind because there's system structure with that, but we'll get you into a little summer school acceleration program, or a proper after school, not some Sylvan Oxford bullshit.
Yeah, not
but some a real like curriculum specific associated program where students can get back on track and address these issues. So like, we can speak about this ad nauseum about all the cracks in the system. It's very unfortunate because like, I know growing up, we're all the same age, relatively speaking. The school system is night and day.
Yeah.
Like we can speak to the fact that not only do we have the academics to get us through, we had the fear of failing to push us through. We had
respectable fear. Respectable fear, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
because
I mean, I'll just say this because I know Faith has to go, so we can wrap it up on the final. I'll actually give Faith the actual final point of the show because I like hearing her. How do you feel moving forward? How do we actually help these kids in education? Are we at a lack point where it's too late for this generation? Have we failed them so much? Or do we have the ability to take a 180 right now and actually balance this education system and help them moving forward?
There's always hope. There's always hope. A child's brain does your brain doesn't really develop to the age of like 21 to 25. So there's always ways to like make things better. I think now we're at a critical point because unfortunately with technology, whether we want to or not, because we keep getting all these tweets and notifications, these kids are very aware of what's going on in terms of how much time and effort is being put to make sure they're getting what they need. And I want this generation to be successful because when I'm old, this generation is they're going to take care of me.
Take care of us.
I want them to be educated. I want them to be healthy. I want them to be good people.
You don't want some kid.
You don't want no waste man taking care of you. I feel you, Faith.
It's just like the thing says I'm supposed to add 50 milligrams to 98 milligrams and stuff like that. Just like, wait, my phone. Hold on. Wait, let me do the math. Oh shit, my phone's dead. You know what? This looks good.
Right? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But if we don't put the proper procedures in play, it's not going to work. There are teachers in the system of all races, of any gender, who are in there for the wrong reasons, have demonstrated and showed that they are unhappy, they don't want to be there anymore. They need to go and bring in the ones who actually want to do the work. There's people who actually care, and to understand that there are different ways of doing things, and different doesn't mean better, different doesn't mean worse, different just means different. And stop being afraid of what you don't know. And stop hating on me because I'm pretty. I'm not going to apologize for being pretty or smart because that's a topic too. Y'all hate it. Y'all hate it. Y'all hate it when you guys think that I'm ignorant. You see this ignorant chick, supposedly ignorant chick, who connects with the community in terms of looks, fashion, speech, hairstyle, all of that. And when I actually show that I'm capable of doing my job and I can actually do it better than you, you big mad. And that is facts. Rohan, you feel me on that? Yeah. Being pretty is a blessing and a curse.
Hey. Hey, Roro, what's your thoughts, bro?
There's so many. Like, I feel for these kids, because of the fact that they have so much potential and the world is such a beautiful place and there's so much exposure to great things. And they're victims of these scenarios. Whether or not you're a privileged individual and you're going through school and you're like, well, what are these guys talking about? Like we have whiteboards and stuff in my school, and what is this old school shit? like these touch sensitive desks, and we have like monitors. Like, have you been to the David Suzuki High School, bro?
Institute?
Yeah. But at the same token, like when we recognize these things in there's marginalized groups who are suffering, like we started at the beginning of our podcast saying that like they have difficulties getting online, they have difficulties getting the resources, there's multiple people sharing the computer. Like if we're going to go down this path of leveraging technology and all these things under the pretense of saying it's going to be better, there has to be a plan. Everything that we've spoke to is saying that everything is fragmented. You know, here's some computers, here's some online content. Okay, is there a curriculum or a method to monitor success and their ability to know at what point are they doing okay, or is it just something to buy time, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I would hate to say this, and Faith, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if we have all this ability to kind of track the progress of people, perhaps there's like studies should follow students. So yes. if a student is like impacted in grade 5 and it manifests in grade 7, not only is it saying, oh, we need to fix that, but I feel like it should go all the way back to grade 5.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, you were the teacher who taught this kid the core. Now when they're at grade 7, when they're supposed to have the foundation, they're impacted. Explain. Mm-hmm. Right?
Please give us a review.
Yeah, exactly. And give them an opportunity, not to really terminate them. I'd rather them be able to say, we're finding that there's a trend that grade 7 kids are struggling with something that they should have learned in grade 5. Mm-hmm. Why is this happening at grade 5? Yeah. Is this something that we need to start earlier? Or do we have to give them more time? Or do we have to apply it? Because like kids are adaptable. If you give them the right direction, they'll be able to change accordingly.
But exactly.
in this day and age where every other business can grow and develop and manifest and transform at the speed of light, while the educational system is still remaining in almost archaic system, that's backwards. That's like, bro, look at the movie industry. Look at the technology. Right. Look at the stuff on TV, special effects and all that sort of stuff. Like look at
10,000 steps forward, and we're still in the 1800s with education.
Right. Like, look at all that technology that's going through, and then when it comes to education, it's still like, yo, we're using books and syllabus and content that's like 10 years old.
1,000 years old.
Exactly. Yep. The content does not, the reason why the education system is what it is like you said, Rohan, the content does not match the generation in terms of how it's being presented. It's a different time.
Right.
It's a different time. And once again, the people who keep telling us how to do our jobs have not been around children in a classroom setting for 20, 30 years. They're going off of memories or based off US studies. Look at Canada. Work on yourselves before you start comparing ourselves to others in some aspects. You understand?
Yeah.
I mean, here's my point on this one. And I'm just going to say this. I'll loop a couple people in just because they need to. This is two-sided. Number one, educators. I believe that you are highly underfunded, and I also believe that you're highly underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
And no teacher should have to take out of their own pocket to make sure that a child has the resources to actually learn or take his education. There's no reason why teachers should have to buy pens and all of these other things. Like, that should be standard in every classroom. That's the first thing.
Yeah, that's pretty
Second thing, the necessary need, like Faith says, to want to be in education should actually come with a psych evaluation. I truly believe that for you to actually want to impact the next generation in the future, you should want to. It shouldn't be a priority need of resources or funds for you. This shouldn't be a job. This should be a calling. Mm-hmm. And it's the same reason why I loop police, firefighters, and all of people, because they're truly underfunded and truly underappreciated. But there's a reason why some aspects are underappreciated, and it's because the drive that you have for the job can be seen 1,000 miles away. We know why you're here. The ones that are truly loved are because you're here for the right reasons. Now, parents, I think what we need to do as parents is look to the future. We need to understand that for us to set up our children, I understand there's a million things that go wrong, but rather than buy those Jordans, rather than buy the next stupid thing that you really, really want, or the next trend that's out there, I think you need to invest more into your child's future. Pick up a good computer. Take some lessons on understanding what the platform is that your child's going to be entering. Like, just because your child has more understanding of Instagram than he has of his education is a problem. The fact that he can learn that button and learn that technology means that he or she is educatable. The problem that we have is that he's implementing that resource on the wrong thing. Rather than learning chemistry, we are learning algorithms and the ability to learn Snapchat. And we are focusing on the wrong things. And I think that comes down to parents needing to reshift the education point as a primary need first, and educators. I think you need to love your job. Love your job so we as people can love you for doing your job. We can demand that you get paid more money. We can demand that you are affecting our child so much that we want you to do better in life. It needs to be a quid pro quo relationship. I mean, and that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and those are all valid points. And one last thing I kind of want to touch on, because you remind me of something. I remember seeing this meme in regards to the change of education from back in the day to now. And the first part is the teacher's just like, your child got a C in the class. And the parents are sitting there and saying, why did you get a C in the class?
See?
This and that.
I know.
What do we need to do in order to improve your grade? And then now the teacher gives the child a C.
Medal?
And hold on. The teacher today gives the child a C, and the parents come and talk to the teacher and say, why did you give my son a C? So what we're seeing today is that there has to be a reconnection on all parties that are involved in the education of a child. The end goal is this little child, whether it's Timmy or Shaniqua or whoever, everyone needs to be invested on this child's development, whether or not it's a teacher, principal, parents, everything, and saying, we need to all invest. So when it gets handed off to the next person, you know in confidence that, Faith did her job. I know you will, but saying, Faith did her job, so Andrew can teach him, right? And then when Andrew's done teaching him, he can go home to Rohan, his father, and Rohan can continue teaching him so it can be secular, right? So we need to reconnect to that whole process of being like, everyone is invested in the child at all levels, whether or not you're the mayor or the government or this or that, to say our education improves so the entire community can grow. Because like you said, Faith, they're going to be the ones taking care of us. They're going to be the ones, like joining Elon Musk and all the rest of them on Mars and all that stuff. Like it next up forward, right? So it's taking a step back and recognizing how can we fix all these issues, whether or not it's elected people getting more money so it can be pumped into the school system to support it, getting the right education system, and taking responsibility for the education. There's too much of, oh, not my problem. And you're seeing it manifest in the school system, right? Like, we're in a pandemic. They're like, okay, you can learn from home. Everybody has the internet. Maybe, but not the same type of internet you need. Yeah, 5 megabytes per second is good for me to watch videos on Instagram. But 5 megabytes per second is nothing to do with video call.
Yeah.
Right?
Why are there kids in McDonald's? Why are kids going to McDonald's and Tim Hortons trying to get their education in the morning? Because they don't have that ability.
Right.
I mean, I'm just gonna say this so we can kind of wrap this episode up. Just the quickest point. Please, if you're a lover of the show, I want you to take the time and comment down below and tell us, what do you think are the biggest problems in our education system? What are the things we need to fix? Is this even fixable? We have to look at this as not just one thing, one problem, it's all problems. And I also want to look at it as education doesn't stop. Here's the true final point. When your child leaves that teacher, that guardian, that person who is watching them, their education doesn't stop. Don't think that just because that person taught them ABCs when they're at school doesn't mean that you don't reinforce that same principle at home. I think we've gotten to that point where we expect one person to do the whole job, rather than actually raising the child as a community. So please tell us, how do you feel about this?
I felt that one.
And last note for those educators, remember, you live with us. Each one of us have teachers that we can speak to, even if we don't remember your name. We can still say, "No, I remember
Shout
that
out
teacher
Mr. Ainsworth Morgan."
Right. So again,
shout out Ainsworth Morgan. You saved my life.
Shout out to Wendy Fume.
Oh, my list is long. Mr. Kane.
Nah, bro. I can only list one. I can list two teachers in my life. I can list the teacher I hate the most, Mr. General Smith. I can't stand you. I know you're in a grave already. And because he was old, fat, and like literally ate soup every day. So I know he's going in the grave. But I'm gonna tell you right now, Mr. Ainsworth Morgan, I'm gonna thank you right now on the show. I was a hyperactive, non-conforming kid who could barely read. And you literally took the time out of your own day. This man got me into a program that allowed me to gain education to the point now where it's a love for me. I truly, truly, truly thank you, sir. Because a man like you actually saved my life. I was going down darker paths and you have no idea. And he's half the reason why I have this drive for this podcast. Because he's the person that gave me the love of passing knowledge along. He's a principal now at a school, and I just want to give him a mad shout out. Mr. Morgan, yo, I got mad love for you. If you're watching, thank you.
Before we cut out, talking about education had to change. Wendy Fume, you were amazing. Thank you for saving me.